Welcome to a special edition of the True North Country Comics podcast, dedicated to promote Canadian comic book creators and supporters. It's May 30th, 2021. I'm John Swinimer. If you want to drop me a line, you can contact me at john@truenorthcountrycomics.com. These podcasts are published to celebrate the exhibitors of this year's virtual edition of the Toronto Comic Arts Festival. TCAF is an annual event gathering comic book creators from around the world to promote broad and diverse voices towards the betterment of the medium of comics, through panels, keynote exclusives, and just basically enjoying the fun of comics. On this episode, I chat with Troy Little of Pegamoose Press about Angora Napkin and more at TCAF 2021. This podcast is available on Apple Podcasts and Google Podcasts. It's also available on the True North Country Comics channel on YouTube. I invite you to like and subscribe. Troy originated in Prince Edward Island, Canada. He left for a while, but then came back. He spent many a year working in animation before shifting his focus full-time to comics. He's written and illustrated The Powerpuff Girls, Rick and Morty vs. Dungeons and Dragons, adapted Hunter S. Thompson's novel Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, Kevin Eastman's radically rearranged Ronin Ragdolls, as well as his own books, Churrasco, and the Angora Napkin series. He's currently working on a collaborative book entitled Butterfly House with his wife, Brenda Hickey, and will soon begin serializing his next book, The Illusion of Life, online. Together, the two of them started Pegamoose Press. Troy has thrice been nominated for an Eisner Award as well as the Harvey, Ringo, and Sequential Awards. And so, without further ado, here's my chat with Troy Little of Pegamoose Press at TCAF 2021. So, Troy Little, thank you very much for taking time to chat with me.
No problem, John. Anytime.
Well, I know we've chatted many times before, but what I usually like to do to start off the interview is ask about what creators are reading now or who's influencing them now. So, wondering who influences your work today?
Oh, boy. What have I been reading? I was reading Killing and Dying, and what was the sketchbook one called? By Adrian.
Loneliness of the Long Distance Cartoonist.
Loneliness of the Long Distance Cartoonist. Yeah, you're supposed to be quiet. Anyway, Adrian's books have been something I've been reading a lot of his stuff lately. I'm not sure why. I just felt I should get caught up on all of Adrian's work. Mm-hmm. And I got a nice box set of Nausicaa, Miyazaki's Nausicaa.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's
Strange
cool.
Adventures had a copy listed on Instagram, so I snatched that up.
Nice. Very good, very good. So we're here talking about the Toronto Comic Arts Festival where you were exhibiting. So I'm wondering if you have any favorite convention or festival moments that you like to share.
Well, it was tricky this year because the whole thing was online, so I really didn't know what to expect. That being the case, it didn't quite feel like TCAF to me.
Right.
Having an online event, I don't know, it just was the first sort of convention, I guess. I know a lot of people are trying to do the conventions online and trying to make the best of a bad situation, really. So this was my first, I guess, attempt at trying to table in a digital virtual Comic-Con. I didn't really have very high expectations, and I guess that's a good thing too, because it's just not the same. I think any convention for me, any convention virtual would have been a little bit of a letdown.
Yeah,
because it's all about meeting the people and flipping through people's books and walking around seeing and talking to other cartoonists. And when you don't have that, I guess I'm just really looking forward to the next in-person convention more so.
Is there anything, though, in the past, though? Have you been to any past conventions or festivals that have really stood out? Any moments that maybe you met a creator or someone you really enjoyed talking to?
Oh, well, I mean, TCAF is one of my favorite shows, which is why I wanted to even try it out virtually. Every time I've done that show, it's just been a absolute treasure trove of books I come back with. I spend more money at TCAF than I would at San Diego because there's so many unique and really interesting creators. Oh, boy, so many people.
I bet, yeah.
I like them all, yeah. Like... I can't even think of where to start, but really, TCAF is one of my favorite shows. Just
sure. Well, I'm sure we'll get back to an in-person festival in the not-too-distant future, so something to look forward to, that's for sure.
Yeah, I think 2016 was the last time I was there, so it's been
yeah. Sure.
Sure. Well, let's talk about the project you were exhibiting at TCAF. Can you talk a wee bit about it and maybe the origins of it as well?
Well, I guess my newest book there was Angora Napkin, the Golden MacGuffin, and that was sort of going to be our in-person feature book from our Pegamoose Press that Brenda and I run. We ran a Kickstarter for that just late last year into the fall, and we're just really hoping to actually get out so you can meet people and say, hey, this is my book, pick it up, flip through it. It was a web comic. It's just been something I've been picking away at, like a 7-year project in my spare time that I finally got knuckled down and finished the book. So having started our little publishing company, it was our second book after Halls of the Turnip King. And really just we wanted to get these books out in front of people. I want them to have them in their hands to kind of see like the quality of the printing we've got and just what fun books they are.
Sure. For those not familiar with Angora Napkin, how would you describe it to someone?
Oh boy, it's a 2-time Eisner-nominated Teletoon pilot animated, virtually unknown indie comic featuring 3 girls, Beatrice, Molly, and Mallory, who are a bubblegum pop rock band, uber optimistic in horrible situations all the time.
Okay. And what inspired you to make it, though?
Back in 1997, I was working in animation in Ottawa when a buddy of mine, Nick Cross, and I were just humming around an idea of like, well, if we could make the cartoon of our dreams, what would we want to make? And we came up with this idea for Angora Napkin, developed it for a while, and we made some storyboards. We wrote a bunch of stories, and it just didn't kind of take off in animation at the time. There was some interest in it, but never really got some legs under it. So a few years later, I really enjoyed the characters and the stories that Nick and I had come up with. And I asked Nick if he'd be cool if I made some graphic novels or comic books and just used the characters. And he was totally fine with that. So I made the first book, and just sort of coincided with me getting in with IDW. So when I offered them a pretty much a finished book, I said, would you guys be interested in this comic of mine? And they agreed to publish that, and it got Eisner nominated for Best Publication for Teens. And so I was getting some traction with that. I started doing the second graphic novel, Harvest of Revenge, and that too got nominated for an Eisner.
And at the same time, congrats, that's great. That's terrific stuff.
And then it got picked up as a pilot for Teletoon. It broadcast, I think, was 2010, maybe on Halloween. So that was pretty cool. But yeah, no, as much as I've struggled with that project to try to get something to happen with it, I've got 3 books and a cartoon. Not too bad for an indie-produced little weirdo cartoon comic thing. And anyone's interested in actually seeing the cartoon pilot, we have it broken up into 2 parts on YouTube.
Ah, nice. Good stuff. So let's talk about your creative process. You don't work alone. I'm wondering how do you work with others, and what is the process? Maybe you could walk me through your workflow there.
I guess it depends on the project for sure. I've had the luxury of being able to kind of stay fairly independent, even working in licensed stuff. One of my first licensed gig was working on the Powerpuff Girls, and they were good enough to let me even write the stories. So it was pretty much almost taking your indie comic mentality and putting that onto a licensed product. And I really enjoyed that. I enjoyed adapting Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas pretty much autonomously. They just let me go at it and said, don't screw it up. And then they've had a few occasions where some really cool projects come along. And one of the big ones recently in the last at least year and a half has been the Rick and Morty versus Dungeons and Dragons series.
Right, yeah.
Jim Zub and Patrick Rothfuss on the first book.
Yeah.
So working with those guys has been easy and fun. Super fun because the stories are really smart, and Jim and Patrick are just great to work with. Jim's just knows his D&D and his Rick and Morty inside and out.
Yeah.
So it's an absolute dream to work with those guys. And working from Jim's scripts is great. He's super flexible. If I have something I want to add to it or whatever, he's always just game to make everything as great as we can.
That's great. It's not too often you get to find that. That's for sure.
Yeah, it's super one of those things you just I want to work with you again and again and again, you know. Because we see a lot of teams of people who always work together.
Yeah, well, he's got a real Conan bent right now, so you got something working with Conan you could probably hook up. You never know.
Any fantasy stuff, and Jim's going to be jumping on that pretty fast. Yeah,
for sure.
And we've got the actually collecting the Rick and Morty as a hardcover with a special 30-page Mr. Meeseeks story we did together that hasn't been released anywhere, and that's coming out in this August from IW Noni. Yeah.
Very good. Something to look forward to there, for sure. So typically at conventions and festivals, you'll have people coming up to you and asking for advice. They want to make their own comic book, or they've got an idea for something. What advice would you give to someone who would walk up to you and say, I'm making a comic book, what should I do? What would you say to them?
Yeah, well, it's never been easier. Wow, I wish I had these resources when I was starting out. And I think the hard part is getting noticed. But you've got this neat new thing called the internet, and most people seem to use that for posting comic books. It's something I'm going to start doing, maybe 10, 15 years after the whole webcomic thing was kicked off, and try and find how does that work for me, working webcomics, to kind of develop your ideas and tell your stories almost in real time, I guess, and getting that kind of feedback. Because I work long form, generally speaking, so my books tend to be big, long graphic novels. Mm-hmm. So you either just disappear for a couple of years, or you can kind of find a way to engage online with an audience as it sort of rolls out. And we've been doing that we have a Patreon site, and I've been serializing my new graphic novel called The Illusion of Life. The last few weeks. I think it's going to probably run another year or so before I'm done. So that's been kind of fun to actually put it out as it's happening and getting people's feedback on it. And it's kind of a work in progress, so they're seeing a phase of it before it's incomplete, there's going to be spelling mistakes and the coloring isn't all done and that sort of thing. So it's kind of coming along for the process, which is part of the fun of a Patreon.
Yeah, I've heard some people using Patreon as a tool to not only connect with fans or readers, but also a way to fund your project along the way. So would you recommend that to someone as a maybe a first step to get things going?
I think it's a great idea, even just to have a few people on board who are supporting you. Is always a nice, pat on the back kind of thing, and makes you feel good. And, you get to buy a coffee or two with that. So
there you go. Cool.
Yeah.
Good. So you talked a bit about Angora Napkin at TCAF, and a wee bit about what's coming down the road. But I wonder if there's anything else that you were allowed to talk about right now that you've got on the sort of table right now that you're working on.
Well, mostly it's full-time focused on the Illusion of Life project. I've got another one out with Kevin Eastman there. We were working on the Radically Rearranged Run and Ragdolls and the Drawing Blood project. And I've done a whole 40-page comic, I think it was, that I wrote and illustrated with Kevin and the guys. It hasn't come out yet because the whole last Ronin kind of blew up and it's taken all their attention. So there's going to be a really cool comic come out someday. It's all done.
Okay.
For that to get into people's hands.
Sure. Well, certainly TCAF is about meeting people and chatting and networking, but it's also about buying books, as you mentioned before. So where do you recommend people go to buy your books?
Pegamoosepress.com is our website, and it's got Angora Napkin, Halls of the Turnip King on there, and you can sign up for our newsletter, get a little preview sneak peek of sampling of our work and what's coming up. Brent and I have a collaboration project we're working on. We're going to be kickstarting in the fall. It's called Butterfly House. Brenda's just finishing up her half of that right now. And that's going to be a really, really cool project because we're each doing half this book. And it crosses over. We start drawing on each other's pages and stuff. So it's a real, uber collaboration. And it's looking really cool. It's looking so good. I can't wait to see it all put together. Should come out, I think, Kickstarter in September.
Sounds good. And where do you recommend people go online to find out more about your current and future projects?
Pegamoose Press is our website again, and it's also got links to our Twitter, our Instagram, Facebook, and all the other social medias you can find us on.
Thanks to Troy for the chat. You can discover more about Troy on Twitter at Meanwhile Studio. Discover Pegamoose Press online at pegamoosepress.com. And thanks to you for listening to the True North Country Comics podcast. If you haven't done so already, please subscribe to and like this podcast on Apple Podcasts. And please leave a good rating. Also check out the TrueNorthCountryComics.com website and follow along on Twitter at True North Comics. True North Country Comics is now on YouTube. Please like and subscribe to that video channel. Please send your feedback to John at TrueNorthCountryComics.com. Thanks again for listening, and come back soon for another episode. Bye for now. True North Country Comics Podcast is copyright True North Country Comics, copyright 2021.